Awakened Living is a 21st century movement for people who consider themselves spiritual but not religious, who have a deep hunger for connected community and a divine impulse for personal and global transformation. Our mission is to encourage and inspire the awakening of human consciousness. Good evening and welcome to Awakened Living Television. My name is TJ Woodward. I'm the Minister and Spiritual Director of Awakened Living in San Francisco. Welcome to our show. The intention of Awakened Living Television is simply this: to bring on a guest we bring on people from very diverse backgrounds with one intention, and that is to share in an authentic way our own spiritual journey. So we have ministers, we have healers of all different types, we have therapists. So this evening, I am truly, truly honored to have with us Reverend Dr. Joan Steadman. Joan is someone who I have experienced as light, as this field of love, which is what we're talking about this evening, is being this infinite potential, this infinite field of love. So Reverend Joan, I'm going to let her share a little bit about her history, but I'm going to speak just before I introduce her to my own experience of her. I've heard her speak many times. I've had the honor and the privilege of working with her as a spiritual coach and counselor. She is a friend, a colleague, and truly one of my spiritual teachers. And my experience of being with her has been nothing short of life-changing. So I say that with deep gratitude and admiration, and I am so grateful that she's here with us this evening. So Reverend Joan, welcome to our show.
Thank you, TJ. It's so absolutely wonderful to be here with you and with your viewers this evening. And just a few words about myself. Currently, I am doing spiritual counseling. I'm available for that, and spiritual counseling in which I simply know the highest truth for individuals and allow their life to unfold magnificently. Previously, until this last February, I was the spiritual leader of the Oakland Center for Spiritual Living, which is a member of Centers for Spiritual Living. I served there for 15 years, teaching, speaking, and doing various other things. And previous to that, I was privileged to be at the Agape International Spiritual Center down in Culver City. I served with Dr. Michael Beckwith, who is an internationally known spiritual teacher. And I was so blessed to be on his original Vision Corps and Board of Trustees, as I was one of the founding members there. And one other thing I think is pivotal in my life that I would like to mention is that I was a Roman Catholic nun for 9 years, straight out of high school. And so I've had a vast experience in spirituality, including a time of desert and not knowing what was going on. So I think that's enough to begin with, to just let you all know who I am and that I'm so grateful to be with you here this evening.
Wow, well, I'm so grateful and so honored that you're here, and I really mean that, Joan, that you have been life-changing to me, and I see you as someone who is absolutely in touch with your own divinity and a true mystic.
Thank you.
So we could go so many different directions with
this. Yes, we could.
But I know that I want to actually two pieces. But the first, I know that you have said to me that recently, after a certain number of years, which you can share if you'd like, I won't share that, you've come to really knowing your purpose in a very profound and I would say simple and very, very profound. So I'm wondering if you could begin by letting us know what that is and how you came to that.
Thank you for asking, TJ, because it feels so funny to me, and I don't mind sharing with everybody at the age of 72, I just turned 72, and that I became so keenly aware that I am simply here to be a field of pure love, in which individuals and all beings can awaken to their magnificence, to the love that's within them and that supports them, and they can transform their lives, because for me, love is the most powerful force in the universe. And so my purpose is so simple. And part of me has gone like, wow, that's so simple. And to have it spoken to me through my own inner voice so concisely that I am a field of pure love, and that's what it's all about. And of course, there's been a part of me that's known this all of my life. It's always been, for some reason, I've just been graced with the ability to love people, and to love people right where they're at.
Wow.
And so it's just powerful to me. And that word, the field, means a lot to me. To be a field where individuals can come and they can rest. Right now I'm thinking of the 23rd Psalm, you know. Yeah.
For those of us who don't know what the 23rd Psalm is, you can give us a little bit about it.
Yeah. The Lord is my shepherd. There's nothing I shall want, but he makes me to lie down in green pastures. And that's the part I'm thinking about in terms of the field of love, that place of resting. People can, when we are being that field, and I know you are too, TJ, that field, when we are being that, people can be in our presence and they can literally rest. They can just, and come home to themselves. Because we're all that.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And, you know, two things stood out. One is someone said to me not long ago, it took you 20 years to come up with that? And I said, well, I guess it actually did. Yes, it takes as long as it takes.
Yes.
And I love that you've had such a diverse path. And I know in previous conversations, you and I have talked about that first moment when you had a God experience or a love experience. And I'm wondering if you'd share that, because I just love where your path started and where it's taken you to this moment. So if you'd share that, I would love to hear it.
Thank you, TJ. Yeah, I would love to share that, because it's been so profound for me. I was raised Roman Catholic, and so therefore at the age of 7, like all good little Roman Catholic people, I made my first communion, or took my first communion, and that was really a pivotal moment for me, because as I took that wafer, the host we used to call it, I really experienced the presence of God in a very profound way. And every single time I took communion after that, so it was a mystical experience for me. And I know for many Catholics, they didn't have that experience. I had that experience, and it has colored my entire life. Because at that moment, I knew I was here to serve the infinite. And I didn't verbalize it as a 7-year-old. I didn't verbalize it. However, I knew, and I can go back to that moment and say, yeah, I can even see myself in the little white dress and the veil, and you know, my little hands folded, walking down the aisle, and knowing so profoundly and feeling so much joy at that feeling.
Well, and you used the word mystical experience, and I'm wondering if you would elaborate a little bit on what that is, because I know that one thing that I appreciate about Catholicism, because the people that I know that grew up Catholic, they have such a wide experience of what Catholicism has meant to them, and it feels like there's room for that there. There's people that have very different relationship with their own God there.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you know, I hear that it's not so encouraged necessarily in all Catholic circles, but the people I know that grew up with that, they had some sort of experience where God, or their God idea, was very alive in them. So I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share like what a mystical experience means to you.
Thank you. Yeah, a mystical experience to me means an innate awareness of my oneness with the divine. And to me, it's without having to think about it or intellectualize it. It's just that, I know this. And it's not something that, it's not something that's every single moment. I mean, we all are human. Let's face it, we're all still in this human experience. And so I've had my moments where I haven't felt that knowingness so strongly, and yet something in me has always known it. I mean, after I left the convent, which, by the way, the convents and the monasteries are great places for mystical experiences, because they're very different from the usual Catholic setup. I mean, it's encouraged to know the God within. It's encouraged to practice the presence. So when I left the convent, I was in a wasteland for 9 years. I was just, my whole idea of God had been shattered. I didn't know what kind of spirituality I would want, and yet there was that hunger within me. And I basically did pretty much nothing, although I did start doing yoga, and I'm sure that was really a powerful practice for me that ushered me into a new awareness of spirituality.
Wow, I'm really struck by your language around your God. The idea of God was shattered for you, and you entered into this kind of, would you call it a dark period?
Yes.
Because I think a lot of times dark night of the soul, that phrase gets thrown around, and I read, and you might know who this person that wrote this beautiful, beautiful definition of dark night of the soul, and that was his take on that was having experienced the God realization or the enlightenment, and then after that going into a period of not knowing that or not experiencing that. And that definitely was my experience of my dark night of the soul.
Yes.
I had had this spiritual awakening. I had this enlightenment, this mystical experience that you and I were one, and God and I, it's all God. And that word may or may not work for people. I mean, I actually have moved away from that word in my own journey. But at that time, that was my word. And then I went through this period where I couldn't feel that again.
Yeah.
And it's turned out to be such an important part of my journey. And I'm wondering if you would be willing to share about that period of your life.
Yes. And I'm right on board with what you're saying about the dark night. I mean, people talk about it like, all my stuff is up, it's the dark night. And the dark night really is. We've attained a certain sense of union with the infinite. We've hit that place of unity, and then all of a sudden it doesn't seem to be there. And St. John of God wrote the classic Dark Night of the Soul, where he talks about that. And yet he also sees it as such a powerful time. And so my experience was I just didn't know anymore, because I couldn't believe in a deity, a God, whatever we want to call it. Like you, I don't like using the word God as much, but I couldn't see it anymore as this person in the sky who somehow was keeping a record of everything I did and rewarded and punished, and I just couldn't see that. And yet I was searching. It's like, what is it then? And I've come to really get that I can't even define it. I don't know what it is. I just have a felt experience of it.
Yeah, the great mystery.
Yes.
Is one great way to experience that. You know, we have such similar paths. I'm not surprised in any way, but I grew up in the Episcopal Church.
Yep.
And I am so grateful for the Episcopal Church. I grew up feeling loved, feeling love, and having that mystical experience. There was something there. There was an energy that I experienced. And yet there was this God idea being taught that didn't make sense to me.
Yes.
That there was this God up in the sky keeping score. And I don't know about you, but if there was a God up in the sky keeping score, I knew I was going to fall short. I mean, I absolutely knew that if it was good and bad list, somehow I wasn't going to get into heaven.
Right.
And so then I did go into this period of deep questioning at best. And I would say really thinking, that doesn't resonate for me, that there's some God up there and that it's about good and bad and right and wrong. So I did go through the wilderness period. And I would love to hear then how you got into, it was Christian Science, right?
It was religious science.
Church of Religious Science.
Yeah, which is still Centers for Spiritual Living. Yeah.
I would love to hear how did that happen?
Well, it was interesting, because during that 9 years, I got married, I had children, and so it wasn't entirely a dark experience, but my spiritual experience was that darkness and that wilderness, as you say. And so I had these 2 young children and used to go to this play group. There were about 4 or 5 women that got together, and we met at the park. And one day we decided without the children we were going to have a talk about spirituality. So we did, and this one person in the group talked about going to the Church of Religious Science in Fullerton, California, which is where I lived at the time. And it just felt right. It was like, oh, I could believe that. We are one. That this presence is everything that is, that there are laws in the universe that can support us. It just felt very enticing to me. So one Sunday, I up and went and never left, and it just felt like coming home. Felt like, okay, this is a real mystical teaching that I can sink my teeth into, and that can grow me. And so that started it right there. Through a play group with my kids.
Wow, amazing. I had, of course, a similar experience, but mine was through Unity.
Oh,
I went to Unity in the late 80s, and it was like, oh, this language, I get this idea. And I had gone to India and had that experience as well. And I had met Amachi, and I was having this experience of an inner knowing or an inner experience of what at that time I would have called God. Now I might call it something different, source or love or light.
Yes.
And so that's also, where our paths are similar.
Very.
And I would love to hear then, it sounds to me that God began to not be a person,
right,
but an energy or an experience that, and And what happened there? What was that
Yeah.
journey for you?
Well, that was interesting for me because, yes, I saw God more as, well, I like to use the word presence. It's a presence in my life. It is. It just is. God is. And what was interesting for me too, though, was I had to give up that old personal idea of God, which was very comforting for me at times. Oh yeah, I can go and pray to this Father, Mother presence, and I did think of it in that way at that time, and I can be comforted, and so I had to redefine all of that. And for a while, it was kind of a grieving process or a different experience of letting go of what that relationship was like for me. Because despite the fact I couldn't buy into it anymore, there was still something very comforting about it. And so then I think through taking classes, through going to services on Sunday, through becoming a practitioner, through all of that, I just got more and more steeped in the awareness that this energy is what I am, that it has created me out of itself. You know, it's not that it's formed, it had this heap of clay and it formed me, but rather, no, I am made out of that substance. And that's been the primary direction. I mean, I just knew that somehow when I got that I am made out of it and I am its incarnation as much as Jesus or the Buddha or Krishna or any of the other great ones.
Yes.
That I am that. Once I could catch that, then the rest of it was a free ride home in a sense. Everything else would start to come together.
Absolutely. It reminds me of Rumi's quote, too, that I'm not a drop in the ocean, but the
Yes.
entire ocean in the drop.
Yes.
And that, to me, just changed everything.
Exactly.
Because there was no longer any idea of separation, not only from this power, this source, this presence, but from everyone.
Yes.
Every
Yes.
living thing.
Yes.
And it really changed me.
Yes, and over the years, it's just grown stronger and stronger, especially the sense of this presence that I am is that same presence you are, that we're just simply, what's the word I want to use? Dimensions of the one. Each one of us is a dimension of the one. Each one of us is part of each other. And that includes all of life, the animals, the plant life, the vegetable life, the mineral life. And so how can I not respect and revere and honor Mother Earth herself and everything and everyone in it, and the whole cosmos, because it's a cosmic thing.
And I know one topic, I'm going to switch gears slightly.
Sure.
One thing I know you and I just love talking about is this human spirit.
Yes.
You know, this idea that, and I want to share, I shared this with you before we started filming or taping or whatever it is we call this. I had a really big experience this morning while I was waking up, you know, literally and figuratively. My committee, you know, that voice was really active, and it was active in a way that was really seeing myself as separate from and seeing myself, quite frankly, as a diagnosis. You know, I work in the mental health field as well as doing ministry.
Yes.
Blend that beautifully. I love that. But there's a lot about diagnosing, and I thought, yeah, I have this particular label, and I just started sitting with that and feeling kind of icky, let's put it that way. And then I just had this thought, what if that's okay?
Yes.
What if it's just part of my path here, and I can use that in a way? What happens when I fully love and accept all aspects of myself, and that just becomes my vehicle for bringing spirit into the world?
Yes. I love that, and I love that you shared that with me, and I'm just so on that same page with you. When I first got into this teaching, I guess I was what you might call an absolutist. It was all about the presence. It was all about acknowledging the absolute reality of spirit, and there could be a tendency in some of these teachings to divorce ourselves from the human. And over the years, what's become so clear to me is exactly what you've said, that this human experience, with all the quirks that all of us have, with all of the imperfections that all of us have, that's the ground, that's the field in which we come back to our oneness. And I've just gotten to so appreciate that. And I think one of the reasons I really was forced to appreciate that was Michael Beckwith gave me the job at Agape of being the pastoral care director. So I was working with people in grief. I was working with people on their deathbeds. I was working with people that were diagnosed, had terrible diagnoses, working with people who were schizophrenic, who were all kinds of individuals. And there's no way I could divorce that and say, wait a minute, this isn't spiritual, or this isn't God, or this isn't. It's all, I like to call it divinely human. We are divinely human, or you could say humanly divine, whichever way you want to say it.
Yeah, I love that. And what came to mind when you were talking was, at one point I woke up and thought, wow, spirituality doesn't need to be prescriptive for me anymore.
Yes.
There's nothing to fix.
That's right.
And I thought, I came into these teachings and the way I heard it from my level of consciousness, which I know you and I love talking about.
Yes.
But from my level of consciousness at the time was, I need to use these principles to get rid of or to eliminate certain aspects of myself. And it's so much more gentle and loving now for me to say it's all one.
Yes.
It's all presence.
Yes, that exactly. That I certainly went through that phase too. I like to think it's the beginning phase of when we first get into this kind of teaching, especially when we learn there are universal laws. Like, oh, okay, I'm going to use this law, and I'm going to fix myself, and I'm going to get the stuff in my life, and and then that gets old really fast. I mean, it's great to build faith, but there's a deeper level that is involved here, and that's knowing my wholeness, knowing your wholeness, knowing that there's nothing to fix about anybody. And I think that's part of, when we talk about that field of love, that's part of that field of love, is that we are being this space where people can come in, they can rest, and they can know they are seen in all of their humanity and all of their divinity as beautiful and loving and loved and cared for, no matter what.
No matter what.
No matter what. So it's like that unconditional acceptance of myself first, because believe me, my core issue, I will put out to the world to know, my core issue is I'm not enough. And so I've had a lot in my life to work with. I'm not enough to do this. I'm not enough to be a good practitioner. Certainly not enough to lead a spiritual community. And yet Spirit kept kicking me into places that I had to work with it.
Well, I know you and I have talked about this before, but I feel like that was one of my core, and I call it a core false assumption, that I'm not enough, because we know that we're this infinite field, and yet I also show up with some false belief. So you're not going to believe this, but we're actually out of time.
Wow.
Almost. We have a little bit of time left, but I'm going to take this opportunity and just say that I had the opportunity of working with you for some spiritual counseling sessions, and I want to speak of how life-changing it was for me. And what I know is that I also was ready and willing to show up and be that presence as well.
Yes.
But in my work as a spiritual counselor, and what I experienced you doing, is that we get to we get to simply be a field of presence.
Yes.
And you did that so beautifully and so powerfully. And I know that's because you've had the ability or the willingness or walking through your own journey. And wow, how powerful it is to have been in your presence for those sessions, and to have you be that presence. And it just reflected it back to me. And we did some really powerful clearing.
Yeah.
And I'm just so eternally grateful to you for that.
Thank you, TJ. I acknowledge that, and I acknowledge too how willing you were and how you did your spiritual work. I think any time where we have sessions like that, spiritual counseling, therapy, whatever it is, that it's so important we bring ourselves willing to do the work, willing to make the inner shift, because it's not about changing anything on the outside, as we've said. So thank you, because you brought such a high degree of willingness. It was easy.
Thank you. Well, what came to mind for me is, like, I would not have asked you to do these sessions had I not been ready, because I knew what I was getting into.
Yeah. Yes,
and
exactly.
I mean that in a great way, of course.
Right. Yes, I still have sessions. My spiritual advisor and counselor is Michael Beckwith, and I still have sessions with him, and I always know what I'm getting into. That I'm not going to sit back on my laurels.
Yeah. This is great.
Yeah.
So in closing, is there anything else that you, well, before we even go there, I want to invite you back.
Thank you. I would love to come back.
For next week's show, because I would love to get more into this conversation that's emerging. I'm as you know, I'm writing my book, and one chapter of the book is dedicated to what I'm seeing as the 4 levels of awareness, or 4 levels of consciousness. And then as I share it, I come to find out that Michael Beckwith has written about this same thing. And then I came to find that someone else had written about it in almost the exact same way.
Yes.
So it's clearly collective consciousness.
Yes.
And so are you willing to come back next week and discuss that?
I would love to, and that's one of my favorite things to discuss.
I know,
so I would
we've had
love
great
that.
conversations.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
So then in closing, please tell is there anything else you want to say about the field of love?
It's so hard to talk about it because it's just about being, this quality of love, just keeping the heart open. And of course that means forgiveness and all kinds of things that we don't have time in the moment to get into.
Yeah.
A lot of forgiveness.
A lot. It's so true.
Yes.
A lot of forgiveness
Yes.
for myself and others.
That's right.
Yeah. So why don't you tell viewers how to find you, because I know that you just launched your new website, and now in your refinement, you're doing spiritual counseling with individuals, and I know you're also speaking. You do guest speaking.
I am. Yes, so I'm guest speaking. I've done one retreat already, so yes, I would love to do that. So my website is www.revjoan.com. Very simple, revjoan.com. And I invite any of you to speak with me, to send a message to me. There's contact information on the website. And I'm just so grateful to be here with all of you this evening. And I thank you again, TJ.
Well, thank you so much, Reverend Joan. And again, I'm just going to say in very clear language, I encourage everyone to go to revjoan.com and look up her work, her history. She's had this incredible life, and her own spiritual journey has led her to this incredible moment of being a presence that is incredibly powerful. So please, anyone that's looking to be in the presence of absolute unconditional love, I encourage you to have a session with Reverend Joan. It really, really changed my life. So thank you all very much, our viewers, for joining us this evening, and I invite you to look us up at Awakened Living and come have the experience of us. We meet every Saturday morning for a group. We have Sunday mornings. We have a gathering that has grown in strength, in numbers, and in power. So I really invite you to come join us too. You can find us online at awakenedlivingsf.org. Thank you so much for joining us. You are the field of love. Good night.